Hello, I'm Brennan Wissinger, and I'm a climate activist, and I'm a 19-year-old climate activist, and I'm a college student who's studying political economics and meteorology, and I also have Asperger's syndrome and ADHD. And today I'm going to give a speech on the climate crisis. Kendall, an African American who was 12 at the time of Hurricane Katrina, was huddled with his family on the second story of their house as the wind swept around their house, and they all thought their house was going to collapse and they were going to die. Then the levees broke and the water started rising quickly and started flooding into their house, creeping closer and closer to the second floor. As winds swept around them, they were scared for their lives and thought they were going to die. The water inched closer and closer to the second story, but luckily only barely skimmed it. Luckily, they had the foresight to bring things they needed to the second floor, as they couldn't get to the first floor. They couldn't sleep much on the floor, much as with the situation going on, and there was water on the floor. Finally, the storm ended. It was relief, but it wasn't over. Meanwhile, they heard and saw helicopters flying by. Either they weren't there to rescue them or never saw them. They saw bodies floating by on the water. They painted markings on top of their house, with Kendall's dad having to climb through a window and somehow reach the roof without a ladder, which he miraculously managed to do, almost falling into the water, which was deep as the first story of their house. They waited 5 days for rescue. 5 days without electricity, 5 days with a limited supply of food and water, 5 days not knowing what was going to happen. Finally, a U.S. Coast Guard helicopter rescued them. They were taken to the Superdome. Inside, over 10,000 people had to live in the building. The building's electrical supply failed, so a backup generator could power the light. So a backup generator had to be used, which could only supply power for the lighting, no air conditioning, and no refrigeration for over 2,000 people. Food rotted, and inside it was over 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Water was leaking onto the Superdome from where people were seeking shelter. There was no water for purification equipment, no toilets, no medical staff, no sick bay, and very little cots. Kendall and his family were not lucky enough to get a cot. The temperatures in the building rose to the 80s, and people were fighting over what little food was available. Food rotted, and the smell of the building was terrible due to the sewage system breaking down, and all the toilets and urinals having overflowed. The water was starting to cover the field. The population was growing to now 30,000, packed into like sardines into a dirty, wet, smelly, putrid building with little electricity. Finally, for over 3 weeks, after over a week, they were evacuated from the Superdome. David was woken up to the sound of his dog barking at 2 a.m. in the morning. His dog ran to the door, where he saw fire. He quickly ran to the kids' bedroom, woke them up, and woke up his wife. The wildfire was moving quickly. They gathered a few essentials, at least the essentials they could find within the few seconds they had, the kids and the dog, and got out of there as fast as they could. As they drove, the fire moved in on them from all directions. It was red, orange, yellow, everywhere around them. All of them wondered if it would be the last time on Earth. They wondered if they would ever see their house again, if they would ever see each other again, and be able to get all back their precious heirlooms. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the fire started getting less and less, and they finally reached the command post. If they waited maybe even a second longer, they probably wouldn't have made it out alive. After days of fighting the fire, which was finally burned out when the rain came, which was late, like it has been for the past couple of years. Finally, they made their way back and realized their house was nothing but a bunch of ashes, completely destroyed. Barsha, who is 8, lives in the Delta of Bangladesh. For generations, her family of 6 used to be farmers. More recently, her delta has been flooding due to heavier monsoons and sea level rise. In her hut, her family has built raised platforms for them to live on when the floodwaters come. Her family saved food for this and cooked on platforms with whatever they stored. Her and her family had to live on those planks for an entire month as the water flooded everything around them. They bathed in putrid water and had to drink from it, which ended up making her and her brother sick. She had a fever and her brother had diarrhea. The rivers broke and they were forced to swim to higher ground. Now her old home is in the middle of the river, and even if the river stayed in one place, the ground would have been salted, meaning her family wouldn't have been able to grow anything and therefore would have had to move anyways. We're seeing the impacts of the climate crisis. King tides in Florida, Kermady about to be swept away. Hurricanes Katrina, Harvey, Sandy, Irma, Maria, and 2000 European heat wave which killed over 56,000 people. Recent bomb cyclones, more severe wildfires in California, Alaska, Russia, and Australia, and other disasters, more frequent heat waves, hotter heat waves. The Syrian civil war, which has killed over 500,000 people and left 12 million displaced, and hundreds of other disasters. I have an announcement. The climate crisis is here. If we continued on this path of destruction called business as usual, we will reach 4.2 degrees Celsius of warming from pre-industrial times by 2100. That path looks like this. Our journey begins with a woman named Sally. She lives in New York City, and she has a cousin, Mia, in Miami, who by the 2050s, or by 1.5 degrees Celsius, will have to move, as Miami's water system will be flooded with seawater, or salt water, yeah, both the same thing. And this tourism industry in Florida will be devastated from the loss of coral reefs, beaches, and other things Florida is known for. She doesn't have enough money to move. Sorry. She has a cousin in Kansas, Adam, who grows corn. But now the droughts have become so severe that he loses more than half of his crop in a normal year, and it just seems to be getting worse, as the yearly drought length is at 2 months and increasing. By the 2060s or 2070s, or 2 degrees Celsius, the hurricane intensity has increased by 47%. Her cousin Mia dies in a hurricane. Sally has been hospitalized after hiking and succumbing to heat exhaustion, which has now become more common, and now she's in debt trying to pay back college and her health insurance expenses. By the 2070s to 2080s, or 3 degrees Celsius, her uncle in Kansas can't produce one-eighth of the corn he normally produces, can't make an income, and commits suicide. The economy crashes into a drop bigger than the Great Depression that they'll never be able to fully recover from. She is unemployed and will be for over 5 years, having to switch careers and leave herself in even more debt to get out of it, even though she went through college. She might lose her home and it will end up homeless. There are widespread food shortages throughout the world, and food prices are ridiculously high, compared even to the income she would have if she had a job. Meanwhile, millions of climate refugees are trying to get to the U.S. because their homes have been destroyed. Just maybe they could seek a better life in the U.S. Meanwhile, a super virus sweeps around the world, killing 12 million people, including many of her friends, family, and neighbors. By 2090 or 2100 or 4 degrees Celsius, there have been huge lock systems built outside New York City because of the rising sea level, which is now higher than many parts of New York City. As this demonstrates, a hurricane comes through the locks, leading to New York City flooding. Sally and her husband get caught in the flooding. After weeks, they are finally rescued. New York City will never be the same. The government is non-existent. The grid is completely down. There is anarchy, looting, rioting, and consistent death. It is the Dark Ages. Nothing works. She dies in a world completely destroyed. And what about your children? Her children, you ask? They get to witness our extinction. This is our future, a world that is almost unthinkable today, a world where everything we hold dear to our hearts is utterly destroyed. And this is what we mean when we say our future has been sold to greedy, rich villains. To prevent this disastrous future, we need to reduce our emissions by over 50% by 2030 and to net zero by 2050. But even that is not enough because those numbers don't take into account positive feedback loops. The scale of positive feedback loops, global equity, and assume my generation can pull millions of tons of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere with technologies that are still in their infancy. It also means that current rates of warning, we have 6 to 9 years left until we unlock until we lock in 1.5 degrees. If we lock in 2 degrees, this could set off a chain reaction leading to those 3 and 4 degrees, and that chain reaction will be beyond human control. Even more frightening, just the fossil fuels we have stockpiled alone exceeds our carbon budget by 5-fold. And that new coal plants, even though they are unprofitable, are still being built, and thanks to over $600 billion in fossil fuel subsidies, funding an industry that is a threat to the entire human race. It's obvious you don't care about us. It's obvious. Instead you only care about money and making excuses. You say we give you hope, but we don't have the power to stop 1.5 degrees. We don't have the time to wait for that power. You already have it. But you don't care. You don't care about the IPCC's findings. You don't care about Paris. You don't care about your constituents. Heck, you don't even care about your own children and grandchildren. You only care about nothing and money and nothing else. For 30 years, you've known the science, but done nothing. That's why we're mad. We're mad at your inaction, not the climate crisis itself. You should have started all of that 30 years ago. But no, you pretended to send a platoon to do the job of an entire army, and you sent another army to perpetuate this crisis. What the current generation has done is nothing short of genocide. They are committing the genocide of the entire human race, an unspeakable act of crime against humanity. Every tyrant falls because people rise up and to overpower them through protest and civil disobedience. And the same goes here. Things will only change if you rise up to act. The greatest generation rose up to Hitler. This greatest generation will also rise up against tyrants. What is the alternative future, you ask? How can we solve this crisis? Well, here's that story. Sally is graduating college. She had a relatively stable childhood. Her parents used some of the paid family leave they were entitled to after she was born, and she was dropped off at a free child care program when her parents had to work. Pre-K and 12th K were also free, of course, but so was her time at college, which she began after a year of public service, during which she spent 6 months restoring wetlands as part of the Civilian Conservation Corps, and another 6 in a developing country, which she chose to do, helping to transition them away from fossil fuels and helping them prepare for climate challenges. Now that she's graduated, it's time to think about what to do with her life. Without student debt, her options are endless. She also won't have to worry about health insurance, since, like most Americans, she isn't extraordinarily wealthy. She is eligible for Medicare, and for the same reason, she can live in public rent-controlled housing, not into the underfunded and neglected units we're accustomed to seeing in the U.S., but in any number of buildings that the country's top architects have competed for to privilege the design, featuring lush green spaces, child care centers, and even restaurants. The solar array that is spread atop the roofs of her housing complex generation all the power it needs on a normal day. The energy that powers our housing unit during low periods of energy is a diverse grid with only renewable and alternative energy sources. like onshore wind, offshore wind, concentrated solar power, geothermal, hydropower, nuclear without pollution, with grid batteries and direct current national grid to connect the wind farms in the Midwest to the cities in the East. Heating and cooking in our energy efficient housing complex is all electric. But utility prices won't be an issue because electricity will be sold by public power marketing administrations to local sellers who mainly will be locally owned electric cooperatives, municipal power districts, but also will include existing electric companies. For work, she is trained to become a high-level engineer at a solar panel manufacturer, though some of her friends are going the nursing and teaching, all well-paid unionized positions, and all are considered an essential part of the transition away from fossil fuels, which is updates about which are broadcast over the nightly news. At the solar manufacturer she'll work at, she'll be producing solar panels not only for the U.S. but all across the world. She won't have to spend long looking for a job at any one of the American job centers around the country. She can walk in and work with a counselor to find a well-paid position on projects that help make her city better able to deal with rising tides and more severe storms, or oral history projects, or switch to careers altogether and receive training toward a union job in the booming clean energy sector. As seas are still rising because we have locked in a certain amount of warming, dikes and locks are being built, roads are being raised, and grain and water storage systems are being built. We have a more robust public health infrastructure, and we are safer as we have built better infrastructure to combat hurricanes and floods. But with these challenges, the seas will soon, with the changes that we're making, seas will soon stop rising, and severe storms will later start to recede and die out. Well, their magnitude right now, their current magnitude will die out. The American Job Centers are just a small part of the Green New Deal Act of 2021, a compromise plan that was only strengthened in the years that followed. The act also created a cap and dividend plan where polluters, aka corporations, are required to buy permits for their emissions, and the number of permits is lowered each year, and the revenue goes back to the American people in the form of a dividend, in which the poor get the most and the rich get the least. But jobs won't be pushed overseas, as there will be a carbon border adjustment, a tax on overseas carbon emissions to push countries to enact better climate policies. For a brief moment, it looked like the Supreme Court might strike down large elements of the Green New Deal, but as a plan to expand the size of the court gained popularity with the public, the justices backed down. Sally might also open her own business. Without having to worry about the cost of daycare or health insurance, she can invest everything into making her dream a reality. The cost of labor for business owners who no longer have to pick up the healthcare tab is reasonable enough that she can afford to pay good wages for the staff that she needs to meet demand. Whichever she chooses, she'll work no more than 40 hours a week, and likely far less, leaving ample time to travel high-speed rail, zero-carbon rail, to visit friends elsewhere, to go hiking or to the beach. She could take an airplane, but now they have high of cost to pay for biofuels and offsets that are required of them as research comes up with a long-term solution. Expansive airports will be denied until a solution can be rendered. Most people don't like flying anyways because of the environmental impact that it has. She could buy an electric car at $25,000 to $36,000, or a new electric car, $25,000 to $36,000 to go these places. She has access to a communal electric car with a mileage of over 700 miles and a single charge, up from the current 250 miles, which can take as low as 5 minutes, down from the current 15 minutes to 6 hours, as research is invested in electric car batteries, which will and electric cars will have a top speed of over 155 miles an hour, which is something they have now. Like most urban Americans, she prefers to take transit, as we have built a massive and free, easy public transit system to allow Americans to get to work or wherever else they need to go. She can enjoy leisurely meals of locally sourced food and drink, and attend concerts in the park. Paying for health care won't be a concern, with everything from routine doctor's visits and screenings to prescription drugs and home health aides covered under a public system, and the Social Security continues to furnish her rent, expenses, and entertainment through the end of her life. National parks and other areas will be expanded, and wildlife will be protected. Farmer Kathy in Kansas, who is friends with Sally's cousin Adam, is a dairy farmer and grows potatoes. Yes, I just said dairy farmer. The USDA has given her funding and expertise to help deal with the challenges in growing an environment with droughts. Large systems of water and grain storage have been created. Also, ag subsidies and crop insurance have been increased, and now the majority goes to small farmers like Kathy and Adam. That is just the start of our benefits for farmers. Now they get income from the government for carbon they sequester through no-till planting, cover crops, and grazing management, holistic management, and maximizing crop diversity. They have been given a grant for anaerobic digesters, precision fertilization, which they get tax credits for. They're only required to implement regenerative agriculture. Kathy gives her cows feed additives, which is recommended for small farmers but required of larger farmers. They reduce methane emissions, as she has gotten funding and ample help from the USDA for doing so. Kathy is able to take public transit vans around the county and into larger cities, where she can take regular buses. She also has an electric truck and an electric car and a biogas tractor. The energy for her home is from the solar power, but it is also connected to the grid. The solar power she got through a grant or low-cost loan from the government. She has also allowed the construction of wind farms on her farm to power America. What about fossil fuel employees? Meet Mark, a former fossil fuel employee. He was employed by the coal industry, which was cutting his salary, potentially leaving him economically stranded. When climate activists forced the government to take action on the climate crisis, the fossil fuel industry, including coal, oil, and natural gas, was nationalized to allow it to bring it down quickly and equitably. He is entitled to a GI Bill of sorts. In addition to everything Sally has provided, he is entitled to housing vouchers and able to take him to take a job anywhere he pleases, free education, and training for a new career, which will be union jobs at the same pay and benefits as his former job. As a former coal miner, he's entitled to expanded Black Lung Disability Fund. Even if they can't find him a job, they'll provide one for him indirectly at some company, with the government paying his salary, or restoring public lands, or storing lands that fossil fuels are mined on, or converting fossil fuel pipelines to an expansive industrial carbon sequestration system to decarbonize industry, which carbon sequestration and hydrogen have taken the place of fossil fuels in his community. And his community hasn't been left behind. For a while, he worked with the same pay and benefits at restoring the fossil fuel lands that he was mining. And then, after that, got a job at the same solar manufacturer that Sally lives at. His community isn't left behind either, which is eligible for grants and economic development, and members of his community are eligible for aid because they are members of a fossil fuel community. Native Americans will also get their lands back, and more aid is given to them, and to make reservations equal Native Americans equal in income to the rest of us, and not impoverished. Pollution deaths are reduced. Instead of the 7 million pollution deaths we have every year, there are now 7 million air pollution deaths we have every year. There are now 0. This is the future we need. We have a choice: be complicit in the genocide of an entire human race, or fight for a caring future through the Green New Deal that stops this crime against humanity and provides for everyone's future. Thank you.